Imagine this. You're taking a trip from New York City to Los Angeles. Instead of telling you which roads to take, your GPS tells you that you have to travel through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Missouri, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona. While these are probably reliable directions in the sense that they're not wrong, there are a few problems with them. The most obvious one is that you still don't know which roads to take. There is also no way of knowing if you've made a wrong turn, and if so, how to fix it. And there's no way of knowing if this is actually the best way for you to get to Los Angeles. This is a very simplified version of how New York public schools administer state tests. It seems absurd, right? Everybody knows that they have to pass the test in order to move on to the next grade level, but there is no GPS-like guide to facilitate learning. Of course, this metaphor is an oversimplification. Some students end up in schools that have fewer resources, and some students have specialized needs. These aspects are not factored into state tests, even though they tend to keep kids from performing on grade level. And ultimately, education is compulsory in a way that cross-country road trips just aren't. This begs the question, what does a school that really navigates its students look like? A set of schools called the New York Performance Standards Consortium is the antithesis to the nightmare of endless testing that seems to rule American public schools, especially the ones in New York. The consortium schools are exempt from all but one of their Regents exams, a series of subjects tests that most New York public school students must take to graduate high school. The consortium schools instead have project-based assessments. Students choose a topic to research and write a paper on under the mentorship of their teacher. Students are in charge of their learning. They're in the driver's seat. They have the freedom to make mistakes, and there is time for the teachers to help them get back on track before grades are due. I talked to a few students at Essex Street Academy, a consortium school in the Lower East Side. Almost all the students identified themselves as bad test takers, and a senior student named Ranija told me she felt that on the Regents, you're on your own. There are no opportunities to learn from your mistakes in the middle of a state exam, and frankly, it isn't too hard to bullshit your way through a multiple choice test even if you learn next to nothing in the class, meaning that some students can pass the test with little engagement to the material. Think back to your high school days. How much do you remember about To Kill a Mockingbird, even though you probably passed your test on it? On the other hand, the project-based assessments are something you actually need to be dedicated to, according to Diamond, another Essex Street senior. It seems that projects force students to learn by doing, which requires that students have skills and motivation. Even if they don't come into the school with these qualities, teachers are there to help develop them in a way that isn't feasible in many test-oriented classrooms. Essex Street classes generally have less than 20 students, and all classes have less than 30. This helps faculty get to know their students personally. Alana, another Essex Street senior, described her advisor, Nick, as a mentor/parent/friend/therapist. And while this means that students are comfortable talking to teachers, it also means that teachers are more comfortable and able to push their students, academically and otherwise. One student was failing in her freshman year, in part because of chronic tardiness. It took a teacher calling her out on it personally to get her to start coming to school on time and start taking initiative. Now, as a senior, she is excelling in all but one of her classes. She is also on the path to college, and she gives some credit to Megan, the school's college counselor, who told her, "You can doubt yourself all you want, but you're going." These faculty interventions helped her improve her projects before grades were finalized and really impacted her ability to move on to the next grade. There is also something to be said about community in this school. Just as there are interventions to keep students from failing, there are also interventions to keep them from being disciplined out of school. Essex Street uses restorative justice techniques, and there are very few offenses for which students will be suspended or expelled. Instead, what usually happens is all parties involved sit down with the teacher and discuss what steps should have been taken. Just like the school's academics, its disciplinary policies emphasize the student's autonomy and right to second chances. The New York testing system as it stands punishes those who don't have the knowledge or the resources that they need to pass tests by holding them back from graduation without necessarily providing a path to help them learn what they need to. Essex Street is the answer to this. Instead of imposing consequences, the school gives guidance. There is a lot to be learned from this model, particularly that telling kids they don't know what they need to know isn't nearly as effective as helping them build those skills that enable learning. Failing kids isn't nearly as effective as showing them what they need to do in order to pass. What I mean to say is, instead of holding students to standards, public education would benefit by navigating students like a GPS would, so that the students don't fall through the cracks.